Beyond chips and AI, Taiwan's traditional industries are facing a different challenge: how to stay competitive in a rapidly changing world while preserving the experience, trust, and industrial strength that made them successful in the first place. We explore how Taiwan's traditional industries are transforming for the next era and whether Taiwan's future advantage may lie not just in technology, but in its ability to evolve with change. We're joined by Elisa Chiu, founder and CEO of Anchor Global. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Your work has focused heavily on industries outside semiconductors and advanced technology.
Definitely. If we look at semiconductor and AI, they have definitely put Taiwan in the global center of performance and economy. But I guess beyond all of those numbers, a deeper question to ask is who is actually participating in, and perhaps more importantly, benefiting from all of that growth. Only about 1/10 of our workforce is directly employed in that sector. So Taiwan's real economy is actually much broader. In reality, the traditional industries, they are shaping jobs, family, and the everyday economy here in Taiwan. For a lot of people, that's our everyday reality. I believe that Taiwan's future should not be carried forwards with only one industry. So the key question is, how do we make sure this capacity to transform is more balanced? I think in Taiwan's traditional industries, we have a lot of what we call hidden champions. Many companies, they don't have global brands or they're not household names. And very often we're not loud or flashy. The Taiwanese culture, usually we are low-key, very practical, and sometimes just like behind the scene. But in reality, we are the backbone of a lot of different industries around the world. And in addition to this manufacturing capacity, in downtimes, very often, a lot of the traditional industry stakeholders in Taiwan, they're also risk-sharing partners for their clients around the world. So say, for example, during down cycles, a lot of them actually take on financial stress, payment delays, and sometimes inventory pressures. And a lot of the Taiwanese partners are willing to do this because they are committed to become global partners for their brands and clients around the world.
What pressures are forcing them to rethink themselves right now?
I think at least probably 3 layers. One, obviously, the external environment is changing rapidly. The tariffs, the wars, the cost of raw materials basically increased dramatically. So, and geopolitically, I think there's a lot of uncertainties that business leaders these days, they have to take into consideration. But in addition to that, I think the global competition is really going through a paradigm shift. So Taiwanese traditional industries, I think we're very good at manufacturing for products. But now the global game is about system. It's about ecosystem, it's about platforms. It's a very different game that a lot of Taiwanese traditional industry stakeholders are not very familiar with. So this is also pushing them to have this necessity to really think about how to stay relevant. And I think lastly, a lot of these companies, they're also facing this issue with succession. So for second and third generation business successors, when they take over the family business, very often they don't just take over factories. They take over this changing world, this very new environment. And in addition to that, if the second or third generation are not interested in running the family business in the traditional way, can they leverage global capital markets, strategic partners, and so on and so forth to carry forward that industrial strength into kind of like the next chapter of what we can do globally. So I think all of this probably contribute to this sense of need to really transform at the moment. So I think very often, how do you translate what you see externally with these global trends into internal strategic language and tools and decision-making mechanism so that you can actually run your business in a very different ways?
the challenges is maybe not just mainly technological as many believe. Would you say it's more human and cultural?
Definitely. I think technology definitely matters, but very often when it comes to transformation, I think human and cultural factors actually play a much bigger role. For example, I think the old way for the traditional industries, they have worked well for a very long time. So it's very difficult to question something that have helped you thrive and succeed for generations. So that's one. I think, it's not just about changing the business model. Very often, it's actually about changing your whole mental model about how you even define yourself. And it's a very big jump. Another thing is that for this kind of transformation and for industrial decline, it doesn't happen overnight. So very often it's not like you wake up and suddenly the company is gone. Usually, you start to sense that, something is going on. The margins started to get thinner and the orders started to get a bit unpredictable. It's harder to attract talents and so on and so forth. But very often it's not immediately you sense that danger. When you actually sense the change, it's often too late. So sometimes it's hard to have that sense of urgency. And then so for transformation, I think both because of this cultural and human factors, that's why it's so challenging. And that's why we're doing this.
So is that what led to the creation of Anchor Industry Lab? Can you tell us more about it?
Definitely. We're entering our 10th year next year. Anchor Industry Lab is really a combination of research-based and field-based executive learning platform. So we have business case, we also have deal analysis, we have international immersion, strategic dialogues, and most importantly, we want to translate into strategy formation for leaders to really bring that external observations and trends into something internal that they can actually action on.
I know that you're working with the cycling industry very closely now, so maybe we can use that as an example.
Sure. A lot of people see the cycling industry as just the bicycles. But the reality is that the bicycle is actually a gateway into something much bigger. So it's about mobility, it's about health, tourism, events, races, is about urban ecosystem, about mobility. Taiwan's traditional industries were so good at building products. But the new era, the new competition is not about just another product. A lot of time, this is a system level issues, a system level challenge.
Right.
So how do we actually move from this linear and incremental innovation to something that you might need to leapfrog a little bit? You might need to really pull yourself away from your day-to-day factory supply chain management and see the world with a very different lens, and then bring back something that you can apply to where you are in the ecosystem. That's what we're trying to really do, to basically change from product-centric thinking to ecosystem thinking. Another thing that I'm also hoping to experiment is through this lab, can we show up a little bit differently globally? Can the world actually see this group of leaders not just as people who are really, really good at manufacturing, but also partners in innovation, in strategy, and even potentially co-investments. So this is not just about perfecting what you make as a product, but about knowing where you are along the value chain and even along this ecosystem map. And it's crucial because that's where the future is. The competition, the new business models, you really need to understand where you stand and start thinking about how you can continue to provide value from where you are. So I think having that lens and having that awareness and that vantage point is crucial for most of the players in the traditional industries in Taiwan.
Do you see that eventually Anchor Industry Lab could become something of a broader transformation model beyond just cycling?
I hope so. All of this could be applied to the textile industries, the machinery industry, the mobility industries, and so on and so forth. So definitely, I hope that this, once we have already established the protocol and tested out, I do hope that in the future we can apply this to other industries in Taiwan.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about the future of Taiwan and what your perspectives are on that. As industries adopt more AI and automation, what human capabilities do you think become even more valuable?
Two things that came to my mind immediately. I think the first one is judgment and trust. AI can expand our imagination. It could accelerate the way that we work. But eventually, humans, we're still the one making the judgment. We still need people who have years of experience to basically own the responsibility and know which possibilities to pursue and to move forwards. Another thing is trust. Trust is something that AI cannot automate. Data is becoming a commodity. I think trust is really the comparative advantage. Every company, everyone, you can use AI, you can claim, you have all of these different models. But guess who people are going to do business with? Usually this is still the people that you trust with years and years of relationship. So I think when it comes to even with the AI, progression and so on and so forth, which is great, and we should embrace that and basically see which one we could adopt into the traditional industries. Mm-hmm. But I still believe that there's huge value in the human side that we should embrace and celebrate.
Then where do you think Taiwan could play a more meaningful role globally going forward?
Well, historically, we have always been seen as this almost like quiet, reliable partner in manufacturing. And I think it's great. We're very proud of that identity. And I think we carry on, we'll be able to continue to bring contribution around that. But I think beyond that, we also can think about how we can contribute to global conversations. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an actual examples. We go to a lot of global trade shows or conferences and summits. Usually, Taiwanese players, we are typically very comfortable behind the scenes. We passively usually wait on our booths, waiting for the global customers to come to us, to talk to us, to give us orders. But can we actually be more proactive? Can we actually participate in more global conversations so that we can actually contribute our insights? To be part of that innovation partners, and potentially, given that there's no shortage of capital on this island, both on the personal and corporate level, we can also be meaningful potential co-investors for a lot of global solutions that we're trying to build together.